Welcome to this edition of the World According to Irina Tsukerman, our very special series on global politics on the KJ Masterclass Live. Irina Tsukerman is a US based national security and human rights lawyer as well as a renowned geopolitical analyst. Her writings and commentary have appeared in diverse US and international media, and she has been and have been translated to over a dozen languages. Every fortnight in the world, according to Irina Shukerman, we traverse the geopolitical landscape and delve into pressing international issues and gain insight from Irina's experts' perspective. Welcome to the show once again, Irina.
As always, glad to be here. Thanks.
Welcome, welcome. Several big topics again today. So let's first touch one, this big one, the Iran-Israel uh, episode that's happening. In fact, uh, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, he has also postponed his visit to the Middle East. So how should we understand what is the situation right now? Will it diffuse? Others are working towards it, or will it not?
Well, for the time being, it looks like Iran is playing psychological games with Israel. Now they're claiming that they will postpone the strike till after the ceasefire talks, which are very likely to fail. Regardless of that, Iran achieves three things. First of all, it buys time to prepare and to figure out what it actually wants to do. Second, it's creating a business risk and creating a sense of uncertainty, which already got Secretary Blinken to postpone his trip to the Middle East. And just as importantly, it is virtue signaling to its own proxies and to the international community and placing the burden on Israel by claiming that if they agree to the Hamas uh, demands to withdraw from Rafah, then maybe Iran won't attack. That's the implication, but they haven't actually stated that, and nobody should really count on that. So, for the time being, Iran is playing a bit of chicken with Israel and with everyone else, and it's reaping the full advantage of it, having this sense of anticipation, forcing Israel to spend resources without actually having to put its own troops at risk.
Right. Posturings apart means, is there a real risk, or do you think both sides know that there is nothing to be achieved in escalating tensions?
Well,
How do you see that? How should the world understand this?
well, for Iran, it's a question of how, not whether, because they do have to respond to Israel to maintain their own credibility in the region at the very least. But they don't have to address it on Israel's terms. Of course, for Israel, it would be better to be able to attack Iran and to destroy its capabilities, for instance. But for Iran, of course, there's nothing to be gained from directly engaging with Israel in such a way that that there is a massive retaliation. So they're first of all looking to see how the U.S. elections are going, what's likely to happen, whether there'll be an opportunity to cause damage with Israel, but also get the Biden administration to continue forcing Israel to not respond to directly, or whether it's going to be the opposite, whether the Biden administration can't really constrain Israel right now. If that is the case, they will probably prefer to act indirectly through Hezbollah and through other proxies, and also possibly by targeting Israeli sites elsewhere, not directly on Israeli soil, but in countries where Israel cannot have a direct intervention.
Right, right, Irina. What about the US? How would it look to the world at this point in time? They have postponed the US Secretary of State visit, the regular visit, every month visit that has been happening. So that has been postponed. Now, uh, after the withdrawal of Joe Biden from the presidential race, already his role seems to have very diminished in that sense, and this U.S. elections now going on. How will the work? Will it impact uh, these elections hugely because U.S. is not going to be able to do anything? Do you think it will impact Kamala Harris's chances here?
Well, I mean, honestly, the more U.S. procrastinates with the sending a very strong deterrent signal to Iran and its network of proxies, the worse are things looking for Kamala Harris. She is rising in the polls for now, based on the floundering and meandering of the Trump campaign. But on the other hand, if there is a very significant escalation, she will be, the Democrats will be seen as weaker leaders, and that will cost them in the polls significantly. When push comes to shove, you can't win the elections on personality alone. You have to have at least some sense of accomplishment, future or present or past. And for now, Harris doesn't have any of it. All she is doing is trying to make herself look slightly better than Donald Trump, but in the sense of a big crisis, Donald Trump has a record and she does not, and that will not be an advantage for her.
Right, that will not be an advantage for her. Now, let's move on to this Ukraine and Russia issue. Ukraine seems to be gaining ground in a different region, Kursk, and how so Russia seems to be on a different, internally also, externally also, it's coming out differently. What should we understand of this? What is Ukraine trying to achieve here, and how? What are the options here for Putin? Means it's a different sort of signaling that is going out to the world.
Basically, Ukraine is turning the tables on Russia. Now that Ukraine has gained access to the weapons it needs from the international community, at least some of them, it has a lot more uh, ability to maneuver. And right now, part of the reason why it's doing what it's doing is to offset the Russian incremental gains on the inside Ukraine. Essentially, the reason being, if Russia is forced to defend its own territory, they will not have the ability to fight and to front simultaneously with equal success. They will have to withdraw from the areas where they've been advancing and focus on their defense. That has not yet happened, but Ukrainians are rapidly gaining ground. Another reason for doing what they're doing is it shows the international community that the war is winnable, even with inferior weapons and military forces. Ukraine is capable of causing very serious damage, and Russia is just not prepared to respond to this attack. So Ukraine has a chance to win the war. There is no reason for it to concede territories, and there is no reason to engage in unfavorable negotiations. It can now negotiate from a position of strength rather than weakness.
Right, it can negotiate from a position of strength. But till some time back, there was this whole talk getting floated that uh, that whatever the situation is, Ukraine should accept it, and that whatever gains Russia has made, that was the talk, and it looked like that some of the international community was trying to understand that and almost uh, you know toying to that idea. Is that now that whole thing has changed differently, and if there is a talk and looks, then it will be an equal on equal footing for both Ukraine and Russia.
I think it could be more than equal footing, because Russia is also under sanctions, and it's increasingly looking to try to triangulate and to um, uh, get some sort of backing from other international actors, but all of them are facing problems of their own. Iran is in the middle of an uncertain situation with Israel. China is facing increasing pushback and tensions, and its economy is struggling. North Korea is making bold threats, but in the meantime, it has not actually shown any serious capabilities that are um, in line with its level of threat. Don't get me wrong; it's a very dangerous actor, but is it really, is its aim as good as its at the level of its aggression? That has yet not materialized in terms of actual demonstration. So Russia has a coalition of partners, but they're not necessarily perfect allies, and they're not necessarily in the best position to help at the moment. It's facing a serious dilemma.
Right. What about Putin? How does this curse thing impacts Putin politically, as well as even in that sense, his survival in the medium to longer term? Do you think it will dent his image internally? Externally, also people are making their own assumptions.
He's looking weaker and weaker with each passing day, and his reaction, by the way, has also been very desperate. He's been paying tiny sums of money to the refugees from the Kursk region to relocate elsewhere in Russia. That shows that they don't have actually enough money to really offer proper support to these internally displaced persons, and he doesn't know how to react. He's not able to do what needs to be done to defend his own territory. And after all the tough talk about Russia's strength and greatness and how he's ready to conquer half the world, he can't even defend his own borders. uh, the weakness for him is far worse than actually the problems related to sanctions, which he could blame on the international community, on Scable, the US, whoever, and his people were buying it, and people around him were buying it. But if the issues now is plain simple inability to actually rise up and walk the walk, then he is facing a very serious problem, and he can explain it. He can trying to explain that, oh well, Ukraine has invaded us, they've always been the bad actor we claim them to be, but no one outside Russia is buying it, and inside Russia I think many people are not buying that either. And for the Putin, it remains a question how much time he has left to turn the situation around before the people who were terrified of him previously start looking for alternative solutions.
Right, right. So suppose if you were in the White House instead of Joe Biden, how would you look at this situation? Would you like to, squeeze every possible thing out of this situation? Or would you like to play a bigger statesman and look at a ceasefire or some sort of a quick sort of a peace talk right now in Ukraine and Russia?
Well, at this point in time, we have to wonder, why is anyone still going along with this current situation? Putin is signaling weakness, not strength. Okay, he has money, but you know what? So will whoever comes after him, and none of that money is going anywhere. And frankly, if the international community puts pressure on Russia right now, they will have better negotiating terms for any future deals. So why anyone would continue playing to Putin's whim at this point in time when it's obvious that his weapons are no good? Turkey is reportedly not using S-400. Um, if he's not able to defend his own territory, he's struggling in Ukraine. He hasn't been able to make any decisive moves there. Why even bother with him? Why not finish him off instead of trying to make compromises? And why would anyone who previously saw Russia as a viable alternative to the US would think that now is beyond me? It's very obvious that he does not have what it takes.
Right, right. Now, looking at the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, he will be visiting that part of the world, Poland and Ukraine. That's, if I understand, that's the plan. How should we, from India, look at it? Is it because just last month, Prime Minister Modi was in Russia, and there it was a different sort of a talk atmosphere, and the whole thing has changed now. How is it now the right time, or do you think the whole posture, because Zelensky at that point in time was a bit different vocal on this whole visit now? How should India look at this whole change situation, especially in the backdrop of this forthcoming visit?
Well, here's the thing. The one might consider this merely a balancing of foreign policy, as India tends to do. visiting, for instance, both Israelis and Palestinians, dealing
Right.
with both Russia and the United States. But there's a different sense to all of this because the last visit to Moscow ended badly. It ended with an embarrassment for India after Putin basically entrapped Prime Minister Modi in this, propaganda show for himself. And then at the end of the day, it turns out that a group of innocent civilians, children in a cancer hospital, were brutally um, killed. It just was not a good ending to the visit. So now, even though the circumstances on the surface are not different from what India has done in the past, the substance of the visit may very well have a very different tone, because Ukraine is now appearing stronger. Ukraine also has energy and resources, and it's looking to make allies, not enemies, even if countries did not openly support it in the past. It looks to establish a stronger presence. It looks to establish stronger diplomacy. Poland is a growing power in Europe. Independent of everything else, it's just advantageous to have relations with it. It's making a huge buying spree of American weapons. So this is all, from India's perspective, is only to its own advantage. It doesn't have anything to lose in this situation.
Right, right. Doesn't have anything to lose. Well, analyze that. Irina, now let's look at this another big story about Bangladesh. Bangladesh Prime Minister, she was forced to resign. She left the country, and now there is a lot of thing happening there also, and also on the diplomatic front. Former Prime Minister, she has also, I read some media reports, she has accused the U.S. in a way, and today is the day when a lot of things happened many years back in Bangladesh. So a lot of very important day for Bangladesh, very important sort of an understanding that is required. Where is Bangladesh going on from this particular point in time? Some have called it this whole change as the second independence war for them. What happens to former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina?
Well, she was forced to resign. Her son, she fled to India, then to reportedly London. Her son claims that she has not actually resigned, that she is going to come back to Bangladesh for elections. Mohammed Yusuf, the banker who was investigated for graft, but who won a Nobel Prize in support of the Democrats in the U.S., at least in for his microfinancing plans for the indigent women in Bangladesh, is the interim prime minister. And there is a lot of concern about the circumstances of what is going on and the direction it's heading. I would describe Sheikh Hasna as the Hosni Mubarak of Southeast Asia. In other words, from India's perspective and even from the US perspective, she was an imperfect ally, but better than the plausible alternatives. She was an autocratic leader who threw her opposition in prison, but the opposition was no more democratic than she was. She was not competent in terms of economy, which contributed to some of the protests from the students on campus, lack of economic opportunity, major corruption. She tolerated human rights abuses against Hindu minorities on her watch, but then formally she appeared to be critical of Islamist factions, and in fact, she was nearly assassinated by one of them in 2021. Nevertheless, despite that, at the time she undertook very minimal action to regain control of the security situation inside Bangladesh. She basically didn't take any actions before the chain of events, in part. In addition to everything else blowing up simultaneously, essentially she designated Jamia Islami as a terrorist organization, and 2 days later, all hell broke loose. But she tolerated them pretty well all this time. So strongholds throughout the country, and now they're seeking political power, just like the Muslim Brotherhood during the Arab Spring came to try to hijack the uprising by politically and economically dissatisfied Egyptian population. We are seeing very much of the same pattern here. There's also Chinese involvement. They're backing the Islamist protesters. Other media outlets are focusing entirely on the pro China and pro Islamist groups and not on the democratic opposition seeking better economic opportunities that are basically looking for a better alternative, which is an opportunity to gone to the Islamist and pro-Chinese groups, they will of course have a very good chance of coming to power, just as it happened in Egypt in 2011, and probably with very similar results. In fact, we're already seeing a lot of it with Hindu are fleeing the country while others are stuck. Um, and this creates a very uncertain situation. There is also potential fighting from in other areas of Southeast Asia spilling over. So we are seeing a potential for a big mess in the region unless this election is advanced by the right people.
Right, right. So let's look at the China's role, because Sheikh Hasina, she has talked about, you know, US's role, that it was about an island, that it was all about them, and they have been actively involved in her, in her losing her position in her own country. But here we are
I
also
mean,
looking at the
he
China.
there's a lot
How
of
should we
blame to
understand
go
this?
around for sure, but frankly, wanted board as soon as they saw an opportunity. Um, Her designation of the Islamists may have precipitated this chain of events, but the country was ready to boil over, which is why it's not just the Islamists, but all sorts of students have been protesting and grabbing the forefront. And I think it's easy to point fingers at political actors, but I don't think any of that would have happened. I think it would have been much more difficult to get rid of her. And case in point, we're seeing in El Salvador, where there's for sure political meddling from the United States and from other countries. And nevertheless, the country has implemented a very strict anti-crime even with all the political meddling in the world, the president of the country is very popular and is still in place.
Right, right, Irina. And what about India's options here? Means with the former Prime Minister of Bangladesh here in this country, and looking at other ways to move around, will India is in India in a difficult position because there is talk of cases against back home, and if that happens, where they may ask India to either hand her over, or maybe India will have no other option but to tell her to look at another country. Also, in terms of dealing with a different government, how do you
Oof,
think India? What? Hello? Yes, Irina, can you hear me? Yes, Irina.
hello,
Yes, Irina, can you hear me?
hello.
Hello. Yes.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Let me see. Let me see. Yes, Irina, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Now I can hear you well.
You okay? You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry for that technical thing. Yeah, so I was just wanting to understand from you, Irina, what are the options from for India here, both in terms of dealing with the former prime minister of that country, and as well as looking at this whole situation, a close ally in the neighborhood.
Well, first of all, it's important to note whether or not uh, Sheikha Hasina has in fact resigned or not. If she has in fact officially resigned, there's nothing to be done about her, and it's important to focus on who comes after and ensure that the situation is politically stable and that the leadership is better going forward to try to shape the course of events in a way that's positive for the region. If she has not resigned, there is a lot of political uncertainty, and it's very important to have to restore order, to have clear, transparent, and fair elections, and to ensure the safety and security of Hindu minorities that are left on their own. And while there's been stories about the persecution, I don't see much help being offered by anyone. Only a lot of talk about the political situation, and I think this is the time to figure out how to um, take action against the groups that are persecuting the minorities and basically pushing for chaos and destabilization and extremism inside the country. And I think that needs to happen regardless of who ends up being in charge. Of course, this is a good time to look for better leaders, to identify better leaders, and to empower them rather than getting this situation be hijacked by assorted adversarial forces.
Right, right. And as we talk about USA's option on different issues, here we have got the election being impacted. Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz, he seems to be having a long history with China. And how do you think that will impact the elections there? Because US seems to be dealing with China much more strongly with so many things. And if you have a team like this, what should we understand? Will it be much more pro-China, or will it be, looking at disentangling from China?
Well, interestingly enough, it's very hard to say what position Kamala Harris is going to take based on her campaign. Her entire campaign seems to be a personality attack on Donald Trump. Maybe it's even a very fair personality attack, but a very clear position. For the time being, she is not making any clear and specific and detailed case for what's going to happen, so it could be anything. It's important to note that the position of vice president is more like a media attack dog and implementer of the president's policy in the US rather than a shaper of that policy. And Tim Walz does not seem to be like the type to break this tradition. There's been very strong vice presidents in the US, and I don't think Waltz is comparable to that. Uh, Nevertheless, the messaging is very is not helpful to the US position on China now. If I think anybody who is viewed as being pro China is at a very high risk of being compromised in some way. And I think the messaging that somebody like that is being chosen as a running mate is likely to be interpreted by the Chinese as an opening, whether it is through negotiations and trying to cut deals behind the scene before the administration even took power, or whether it means an opportunity to do some damage and maybe go after Taiwan or go after Philippines, or try to challenge the US in some other serious way remains to be seen, but it's not good regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now for the last topic of the day, Olympics. Let's look at the Olympics. Now it's over, but the controversies are still being talked about. How would you look at this year's Olympic
Hello?
Games? Yes, Irina, are you able to hear me?
Hello?
Yes, Irina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. But so
Yes.
the Olympics this year turned out to be quite political. They were both political and raise Taiwanese flag or to even use the word Taiwan, thanks to the influence of the Chinese delegation and the rules of the Olympic Committee. They also banned yellow ribbons that the Israelis fans would have worn in favor in support of the hostages taken by Hamas. Instead, the Israeli team improvised and had an artistic swimming debut featuring a yellow ribbon made out of human participants in the exercise. Um, there's also been controversies of health-related nature, including the incredibly dirty sand that was not cleaned properly in time for the competition. In fact, what happened was that the the mechanisms for cleaning the river were overloaded, and apparently a fair amount of sewage spilled into the water, making many athletes extremely ill and affecting the competition. Some were saying that even the beam used by many athletes, including the famous Simone Biles from the US for gymnastics, was also somehow compromised because she and a number of other athletes fell. And that there's been also a controversy about two fighters from Taiwan and from Algeria, female boxers, who were accused by a Russia-linked um, French Boxing Association of being born male and having XY chromosomes and essentially failing the quote unquote, but not meeting the boxing standards for competition. There's absolutely no evidence that is true, and there's no history of any sort of medical intervention by either of those two boxers, as far as anyone knows, and there's no evidence that any such tests were actually presented or that they were in any way um, uh, anything that had any serious scientific backing behind them. But nevertheless, conspiracy theories and rumors persisted throughout the Olympics and continue even now after Iman, the Algerian fighter, won a gold medal in her category. So, unfortunately, this sort of instigation of chaos is only likely to persist in the future, thanks to the ability of some interest to manipulate media to insert controversy and to insert to play on common concerns, fears, and wedge issues.
Right, Irina. So, does the future of Olympics, we have many, because the Olympics were supposed to bring different countries together in spite of whatever the situation of the world, but we started with the drones and we are ending up with so many controversies and so many things. So, do you think now, that the outside world of politics and the Olympics itself are almost, imitating each other, that there will be, how do you see the future? People will now start viewing as Olympics something of a respite from everything, or something as being part of this whole world of politics?
I mean, I think there were still many great moments throughout this entire competition, because at the end of the day, athletes still want to do what they do best, which is to compete, to win, and to entertain viewers. But the International Olympic Committee is extremely corrupt. It needs to be thoroughly cleaned up, maybe ended and started from scratch. The whole field of sports has become extremely politicized and corrupted financially, depending on the type of sports. And of course, host countries have themselves to blame for part of it, for failing to take adequate measures to ensure best conditions for athletes, be it cleaning up the open water spaces, or providing adequate nutrition or adequate air conditioning during a hot summer season. Whatever the case may be, that clearly was not met at this Olympics, and that is not something that you can resolve by accusing, Russians or whoever from meddling. That's a separate issue, but that meddling also took place. It will continue to take place in any major sports or cultural or official events taking place in the West from now on. And I think all the countries should be prepared for something like that long before. They should be vigilant, and they should be taking uh, inoculation measures and prevention measures long before actually hosting these events.
Absolutely, absolutely. With this, that's the wrap up on this edition of The World According to Irina Shukerman on the KJ Masterclass Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay tuned for more insightful perspective from Irina on global politics. See you very soon. Once again.
Thank you so much.